Welcome back to the Restaurant Growth Show podcast. Today, we're excited to welcome our guest, Kenny Rose. He's the founder and CEO of FranShares, a Chicago-based startup. FranShares enables people to invest in franchises for as little as $500, which is very interesting because in the past, licensing a franchise had a pretty steep barrier to entry. Not everyone has $1 million to license a popular brand like, say, a McDonald's. Recently featured in TechCrunch, Kenny is here to shed some light on the world of franchising, which is nearly $1 trillion business or industry, I should say. That's trillion with a T. Kenny, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Thanks so much for having me. After that intro, I don't think I could be any better. That was great.
That's all. We like to put our guests on pedestals. We really like to build you up. Listen, before we jump in, because we've got a lot to unpack here. This is, in a sense, it's a fractional franchising, and hopefully I'm not butchering that. I'm sure you'll correct our course there, but we've got a lot to unpack in the show. But can you tell our audience a little bit about your journey and what led you to founding FranShares and your relationship to the restaurant industry?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I originally got my career started off in the world of finance. I was at Merrill Lynch in San Francisco, and back then you saw robo-advisors coming along, and I didn't really see a lot of long-term growth there for someone like me. And I wanted to branch out, do something new. I come from an entrepreneurial family, so wanted something like that, but didn't really have the next Facebook idea. And so, I got introduced to the world of franchising in a pretty unusual way. It was a family friend. He was the CEO of a company who coaches CEOs, so great person to talk to for that next step in your career. And he throws me a huge curveball. What do you know about franchises? And I mean, I did middle school in a town that didn't allow franchises in it. So it was I was aware of like Subway and McDonald's, but I'm like, what do you know about franchises? And found out his company was a franchise. So not only are there franchises for coaching CEOs, they have them for hair care, automotive, fitness, kids fitness, like they franchise everything. And so I saw this as like a very big industry that was there, but didn't have a ton of people really aware of it. And so I got into the space as what's called a franchise broker. So someone who's interested in owning a franchise usually doesn't know all these different industries and what brands are a good fit or what's up and coming. And so I'd recommend brands for them based on their budget, their skill set and goals, and coach them through the whole research and purchase process. And I spent about a decade doing this, eventually starting my own brokerage and putting an emphasis on educational content because I again found that most people don't know all that much about franchising. And I started off just answering questions on Quora, and then reaching out to different journals to try and be a source for them, and eventually became the #1 writer on Quora. Got into Forbes, was on ABC, reached over 300 million people without spending a penny on ads. And throughout this whole time, talking to thousands of people, I realized there was a really big problem, which is that the people who have the money to own a franchise, they've usually already had really successful careers. They don't want to go and start from, even with the business system in place, they're still starting a new entrepreneurial journey. And really, they want it as something they can invest in, something that produces income, something that's a real tangible asset that's in their community. And then on the other side, the people who are really the best to run franchises, people who have worked their way up through the ranks, don't have the capital for it. I would tell investors from like the venture side is imagine you could only invest in founders that were already millionaires and were having someone else run the company for them. They would never write a check. And that's really what the franchise industry has found itself in, is because it's so expensive to start a franchise. And so that's why we created FranShares. It's the first platform where anyone can invest into franchises as part of their portfolio. So it's an income producing asset that it's something that people can invest in real estate and artwork and all these other types of alternative investments. But there was really no way to go invest in a franchise unless you did it all on your own. And we launched a few years ago, and since then we've gotten almost 45,000 people signed up and have facilitated millions in investments from different fast food franchises to kids fitness and other industries there too. So it's been a really great journey. It's been awesome to see all the support, and I love when people just say that makes sense. That's really what I've always thought of franchising, is it's just something that makes sense, is people don't really know all that much about it.
It's amazing. I think that in my experience, I've met people that do help others to do franchises or franchising their own business when it gets to a certain stage and stuff like that. I always felt felt that it was an invisible industry. I always imagined there's going to be more to this, but it feels like a barrier to entry, so difficult, so unknown. like, where do you start, right? But I find it fascinating, and the impact that you're having in people's lives, that they can actually invest on something that it may seem impossible. I find fascinating. Great idea.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. It's also not just the investing side of it too. It's also the entrepreneurial side. There's people, we live in America, and I've always found you should be able to go build your own dreams and be able to grow something on your own. But, the barriers are just so high today. And so you have people who, that person who is a manager at a McDonald's, they may take 3 buses every day and they work so hard. They provide for a family. And that's also the person who could never get a loan to go own their own, even though they know everything behind it on how to do it. So, it's not just a marketplace for people to invest. It's a two-sided marketplace for, entrepreneurs to become owners.
Beauty. Kenny, you've worked with hundreds of restaurant franchise locations. What key factors should aspiring franchisees look for when evaluating a brand to partner with?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different parts. Everything from, honestly, what the industry is. Even within food, there's so many different subsectors, whether that's different types of food, from fast food to quick service restaurants, from Asian cuisine to American to Italian. So for one, understanding like those different areas and what may be oversaturated, what has a lot of opportunity. But you're also especially looking at the franchisor, because the franchisor is providing all that support for you. There's what going to make sure that you run a profitable business and can be successful. And it's important to find out everything from, like, obviously what the investment is, but what levels of support you get, and especially like how happy franchisees are. One of the most important things you do in researching franchises is talking to other franchisees. And you want to talk to as many as possible, because if you keep talking to more and more and they love everything that about it, it's a good business to get in with. But if you talk to some people and they're like, oh, I'm standing in front of a Costco trying to find food for today, that's a problem. And on the other side, maybe they can only go through one vendor and they're paying astronomical prices. Like, that's another big problem. You're also looking at things like, litigation. Are franchisees suing the franchisor? And these are all things that are part of public disclosure. You're able to find out, but it's what a lot of people don't know to do because they're just not very familiar with the franchise world. They can see a giant big brand name and think, well, there's such a big brand, it must be great. But that's definitely not always the case. You're also looking for, there's just endless areas you go into, but one I always say is important is things like territory restrictions. You've got to be confident that you're going to be able to open a location and they're not going to sell a location to open up next door to you that's going to be competing with you. You need protection and be able to operate in a safe space and really build within your community there.
Wow, I can see all those things from my restaurant experience, which is my previous company. It was an online ordering solution, and one of the things that sometimes the franchisees would have a problem with is exactly that, the density of the same brand in the neighborhood. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, right?
I will say, honestly, I don't think it ever works if it's too dense. It can work for the franchisor, but it's not going to work for every franchisee. And it might work for one franchisee, but it won't work with all of them. And so, that's why it's important to make sure that you do have that protection there, and that they're not going to be, putting your feet to the fire. They're not going to be very hostile towards you. Like, you want a great relationship with the franchisor, because it's a marriage you're getting into. You're going to be with them for a long time, and you got to know it's going to be a happy marriage because you've seen other people in happy marriages with them.
Lord knows that a business relationship is a marriage. It truly, truly is. You really need to know and trust and be honest and transparent with all of your business partners. There's just no two ways about it. Kenny, listen, you mentioned that partnering with an established brand is crucial for success. Can you explain why this is often the best path for entrepreneurs looking to launch a restaurant?
Honestly, if you've never ran a restaurant before, it sounds great and easy on paper. Well, it may sound great.
No, it
easy,
doesn't.
But,
no, it doesn't. Let's be honest.
I mean, anyone who's owned any business will tell you it's difficult, even if you've got all the greatest things behind you. And it's important to have all the different systems in place. Like, you could be a great chef, but that doesn't mean you know how to market the restaurant. It doesn't mean you know how to run operations and hiring and HR. And so you're looking to make sure that all these different parts of the operation, you have support in and guidance, and that there's a very clear picture going forward. And usually when they're more established brands, you're going to be able to see, like, okay, they've done this on a large scale in different areas. Now, for some people, maybe they do want to be a little more on the riskier side, but have the bigger opportunity. So maybe it's a newer brand, but I can get into a new major metro. If I try and get a McDonald's, they're not going to let me open one in Chicago because there are enough of them here. But then, like Hawaiian Bros just opened a location here, and that's one that they weren't around here. And so the franchisee there got to get in prime downtown Chicago. And so it's just like any investment. Some people want some more risk for more reward, and others want to be more conservative for less reward. So it really depends on what your risk tolerance is, as well as what your experience is. Like if you're a very inexperienced operator, you probably shouldn't go after something that's less proven out. Versus if you're that's why a lot of these newer brands, they look for very experienced multi-unit, multi-brand operators, because they know they can help them grow from the very beginning and be a lot more independent.
Whereas an established brand, it's a much more out of the box, and it's sort of, I don't want to oversimplify opening up, say, a McDonald's or a KFC, but over the years, they've really proven out their systems, and they can set the operator up for success a little bit better than say a newer brand. That's great. Thank you for that.
I would say, to add on to that, you could also look at it just from being in the corporate world too, where, if you work for a startup, you've got a lot of say in there and you can make new things happen and there's a lot more opportunity. But also, if you're not that really internally driven one, it's going to be really difficult for you. And then you could go work at Google, and they're a massive company and you can do great, but good luck trying to move all the way up to running the company or even a division there. So it's very comparable in that sense when you're looking at the different size and scale, where you fit in.
Now, based on your experience, can you share an example of a franchise partnership that exceeded revenue expectations? What are the key factors that contributed to that success?
It's actually one of our earlier investments. It's a husband-wife team, and they are over in North Carolina, and they're with a brand called Teriyaki Madness, and they have a couple hundred locations now. But what I loved about them is that they had experience, but not opportunity. So they actually met while they were both working for Buffalo Wild Wings corporate. And between the two of them, they helped launch, I think it was 150 different locations. So absolutely incredible operating experience. And they have done it together. They knew exactly what they were getting into. And they basically went all in and funded their own location and crushed it. They did super well. They were trying to grow into more locations though. And again, the lending just isn't always there when you're, especially a smaller operator trying to get started out. But we saw that they had a ton of grit, they had a ton of experience, and they knew people. When you talk to those who work for them, they love those two. And that you could tell that they really care for them. And literally within their first year, they are blowing past what an average location does. That could take years to ramp up to. And, they're really hands-on both in the restaurant and in the community too. They're, things on local radio and the local news. They're part of the, family Facebook groups in the community. And so those people who are actually a part of the community and actually work their butt off, they're the ones who are going to succeed. And, versus those who try writing a check and thinks it's going to run itself, that's usually where you're going to find out that no business runs itself.
Right. I can relate to that too. I think we've had marketers in the show, and that's one of the things that they're be part of the community. Just have your phone on you, capture your people, share about the community, show that you're part of it. And because at the end of the day, the location is always competing to be the favorite in the neighborhood, right?
Yeah.
So in that sense, it's the same principle. And I think I can see where it's all that opportunity there. Gordon?
Yes, sir. Kenny, look, 2024 is winding down, and we're always looking to the future, and as should any potential franchisee. As we look to 2025, what restaurant franchise brands do you think are worth betting on, and what makes them stand out in today's market?
Yeah, I'll give two different answers because there's, again, the more established brands and there's the newer brands. When you're looking at a more established brand, you're looking at innovation. How do they continue to stand out and change and evolve? And that's something I think Taco Bell does incredibly well at, ability to go over and customize everything on the menu. They're developing new locations that specialize in, the delivery industry that's just everywhere now. A lot of locations for other franchises, you might still have to go and park and go inside and grab the order. Newer locations for Taco Bell are having dedicated drive-through lanes just for Uber delivery drivers. And, they're also looking at, what new types of food are people really going to resonate with. And so they look at even leveraging other types of brand names. They did a Cheez-It Supreme Crunch wrap. And that was just honestly, it's tasty, but also it's just got that other brand name. You're looking at multiple brand names, you're getting multiple people coming in to try it out, and now they're going to try other things on the menu. But then on the other side of it, we're working with a franchise group in Hawaiian Bros, and most people don't really think about Hawaiian food as like this huge different industry, but for a long time, L&L Hawaiian Barbecue was doing incredibly well. They didn't really innovate a whole lot. They didn't really focus on expansion. So they're still there, just not really growing. Versus you look at Hawaiian Bros, their average unit volume sales is outpacing that of pretty much everyone but Chick-fil-A. It's wild how well they're doing. And they have a focus on newer things that you have to, like social media. They're big on TikTok. They're big on being part of the community, engaging with customers. And even a brand as small as that, they've got, I think, 50 locations open and I think a couple hundred more sold. They also have these separate dedicated drive-through lanes for delivery drivers. And, it's one where I see that they have a very unique edge in the market, and they are just really pushing forward to deliver good quality food. And from franchisees to the franchisor, there's a focus on people and process. If you're going to be a franchisee, you have to go do every aspect of the business so that you know what it's like.
That's really interesting. I'm curious, would off-premise technology and a focus on third-party takeout, pickup, would a focus on that aspect of the business really elevate a value of a brand that is, franchising and looking to expand quickly? Is that something that a franchisee should really look at?
I think you got to do a little bit of everything. It's just like marketing. If you focus on one channel, it's not going to be enough. You could have an email list, but if you're not also having physical presence, if you're not, doing digital advertising, it's not going to hit the same way. And so I think it's important to really be able to look at these different avenues of how they grow your business altogether. So if you focus too much on the delivery services, they take a big cut, unfortunately. And you're losing profitability there. But it is a way for you to get your brand name out there and to get more people. So you might get higher volume at a lower return, but it's going to get people aware of you to then be like, hey, I'm just going to go drive down to Hawaiian Bros myself next time. Oh, I know that place. I've ordered it before. Let me go in there. Versus if you never put yourself on there, people won't be able to find you that way. And that's how they find a lot of new restaurants today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, visibility is key. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that this fascination with the ghost kitchens, that it kind of like shifted quite a bit after the big promise during the pandemic. It's related to that. I think it's also like the connection to, you want to have the real experience to really embrace and memorize with your emotional and not only a key, but emotional intelligence of the space and the smell and and service and feeling that you're part of it.
Service, the people, it's so huge.
Like you may be taking off the 30% that labor is, but at the same time, you're sacrificing all these different things and a long-term experience that we all remember with our hearts more than just with our bellies.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't think anyone has a favorite restaurant. They're like, oh, I don't remember what the service was. You had a good service.
Exactly.
I really love their takeout bag, though. Like it's just not something that you hear, right?
It's really hard to compete with Apple. That's about it.
That's right.
So now on this flip side, what are the common mistakes you see new franchisee make when they're starting with restaurant franchise specifically, and how can they avoid them?
Yeah, I think there's two big ones. One is the assumption that businesses run themselves. They think even the gold arches can fail. If you do not put any effort into it, nothing's going to come out of it. And so I think people underestimating the amount of work that needs to go in or that they're going to put in is a huge mistake. Another one is initial capital that you need. I think a lot of people try and save money, especially in franchising. It's a personal investment typically. And so they think, oh, you know what, I'll do this location because it's a little cheaper. I'll find a manager that I can pay 20 grand less a year for. They say to spend 10,000 on that grand opening marketing, but maybe I can do 5. And they think, this person saved 50 grand. They think they're a genius, but really they chipped away at the most core parts of the foundation that are going to allow it to become a staple in the community and grow. And so I think it's, underspending can be a really detriment to the business. And then finally, a lack of focus on people. I think people tend to employees make companies run. And if you treat them poorly, they will make other companies go run instead. And so it's really important to treat them well, pay them well, reward them, provide upward mobility, and treat them like people, treat them kind. No one stays with a bad boss forever, but they will go to fight for respectful bosses instead.
I couldn't agree. The show couldn't agree more with you. I think that if you have a chance to go to some of we have a couple of regulars that are really powerful on what managing people is about and building leaders within and general managers, that everybody should be a general manager. It's fascinating to hear you say that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a common theme in this show just by us talking to the experts within the industry. And it really always comes down to people, right? You're not going to run a successful business if you're not treating people correctly and giving them opportunities. So yeah, we definitely appreciate where you're coming from. Listen, switching gears a little bit here, let's talk a little bit about funding and support. FranShares offers funding to a restaurant franchise operators. What should franchisees look for in a funding partner, and how can this support help them achieve their business goals?
Yeah. A lot of it's looking at your long-term goals and the business model. Typically the other routes that you can go are there's bank loans, if you're a larger one, private equity. Most people I've talked to have gone the private equity route. It's a necessary thing, but not always what they're looking for. Most people go into franchising to be their own boss. Like, yes, have a business model and a brand in place, but they want to run their own business. And I think when depending where you take money from, people can tell you how to run the business, and that's not what you got into it for. There's also, who's working with you through the good times and the bad. Where we really pride ourselves is that, people are investing in the business. They're not putting debt on it. And so, honestly, you're going to have bad months sometimes. Every business does. And frankly, partners should understand that. I have investors in FranShares as a company, and they understand if that happens. Versus if you go get a big loan, the first hits, loans due. First hits, loans due. And the thing is, that's not a partner, that's a creditor. And so that's something that you need to be thinking about is like, what am I putting up? What is my risk? And, who's going to be there for me? And so, and honestly, there is no silver bullet. There's no one thing that's right for everyone. Some people may say franchise makes no sense for them. Others will say banks make no sense for them, and even private equity. So, it's really understanding, how you want to run your business, how the financials work out. And, honestly, we're a bit out of the box. Like, besides the fact that it's not a loan or we're not trying to be a boss, one thing that people that have been raising through this really like is that it's community driven. If we're always going to promote investors locally first, because I'm in Chicago, and if they're opening the next Hawaiian Bros here, we're going to promote the Chicago people first, because if I own a piece of it, I'm going to order from it. I'm going to tell my friends to go order from it. Any investor I've talked to who's invested in or looking at an opportunity on the platform, they have talked to other people about it. That is creating brand awareness, which is what you need. That's creating community awareness, which we said is huge. And as an owner, you're only one person. But why be one person in the community when you can have hundreds or thousands of other people in the community who are advocates for you and telling people about you and being customers of you? Usually you're spending money to get customers. Now you can have people investing in you to be your customer.
That makes a lot of sense. And, I think one of the common themes of this show, this episode in particular, is partnerships and, marriages. And would it be correct to say that FranShares would be, I know fractional is sort of a buzz term these days, but would it be fair to say that FranShares is a fractional investment in franchises, or how would you word that?
Honestly, there's a reason we called it FranShares. It's buy shares of franchises.
Right.
It's a fraction of it, but you are investing in a piece of it. You're a co-owner of it. It's part of your portfolio, but also part of your community. And so it's something entirely different. I think fractional is definitely a buzzword, and I'm usually not a fan of buzzwords. Frankly, the F word is franchising is not the sexiest one. I don't think fractional is too, but I think when you break down what it is, it's, hey, would you like to invest in a business in your community that creates jobs, gets entrepreneurs going, keeps tax dollars in your community? People talk about shopping local and don't think of franchising as the same way, but frankly, they love to talk about how much they love Trader Joe's. Most of that money doesn't even stay in the country. They're owned domestic or internationally. And so franchising just has this negative connotation with it, yet people love brand names. It's honestly, it's a very backwards thing to me. And I think it's just the biggest misunderstood industry out there. Because when you think about it, you're like, hey, I'd like to invest in this local business owner. They got a ton of support behind them. They have a great offering at great prices, and they create jobs in the community. You're like, yeah, I'd invest in that. It's a franchise. Whoa, 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 whoa. And so, I think there's just this, it's a weird backwards thing of how we view it right now. And, people love romanticize the idea of startups and, creating your own. It is creating your own. It's just creating your own is not easy. Startup failure rate is astronomically high. And the idea is to reduce that failure rate, to reduce the amount of people who lose things owning a business by having that support in place. And now it's not just the support of the business model, but it's the support of the community and the capital behind you.
I really love the fact that, you're pulling back the curtain on franchising and really shining a light on what it is, what it isn't. It's a little bit reminiscent of sort of what we're doing with Dynpricing as we talk about dynamic pricing, and we get this, whoa, 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 you're increasing prices and all those kind of things. So we're kind of experiencing similar visceral reactions, I guess you could say, from the general public. And it's like an educational, standpoint where we're just like, no, well, this is what it is. This is what it isn't. Let's walk through this together, because there's a lot of benefit for you, for the community, for partnerships and the like. So I really, really appreciate, what you're doing with FranShares. And the mission that you're on right now, it's really remarkable.
I was going to say, and especially for you guys too, because people can complain about prices flexing up, but they don't complain about prices flexing down. It's no one. There's no news about the plane that lands safely, and people talk about how high prices in the grocery store go, but they're not going down. And so, prices at food place establishments can go up, but the fact that they can't go down too is what. I mean, that's the point of it, is that it's supposed to work to everyone's benefit.
I couldn't agree more. I always explain that, and it's funny because today I was sharing with Gordon that there was this new slogan of Expedia, and it just simply says, like empires, prices like empires, goes up, sometimes they fall. And the reality is like that industry, which is the third party of hotels and airlines, is the one that through dynamic pricing is now able to offer prices that were never possible. Like the discounts on tickets that we get today were never possible if it wasn't because of the stabilization of the whole ecosystem, thanks to dynamic pricing. So that reluctance is something that we fight every day. We educate, we dance with it. And at the end of the day, it's going to be a benefit for everybody. The environment, the consumer, the delivery drivers, the delivery company, like you name it. That's the whole point of this. And it's exciting. I am so inspired by you, what you're doing. When you get to plug in, because you're gonna get your plug here, please do share how to get there, because I want to invest money.
I really appreciate that. I would say there's two ways to plug. One's personal and one's the business. For one, I always invite people to connect with me on LinkedIn and say how you met me, just because I think people are what drive everything at the end of the day. And so I always like to open up my network, relationships make everyone go round. But then also when it comes to FranShares, when you just go to franshares.com, you can see investments that are open. You actually get to hear the stories about who's raising and what their business is and what their background is and what they plan to do. There's a lot of transparency in franchising that you don't find in other types of investments, which is one of the reasons I love this industry.
Love it. Love the passion. Contagious.
That's fantastic. That's great. Speaking of plugs, we got to do it. Podcast is sponsored by Dynpricing, real-time restaurant profitability. Dynpricing uses artificial intelligence to improve restaurant profitability by dynamically updating menus across digital channels like Uber Eats, DoorDash, and Grubhub. That's all the time we have for this episode. Thanks again to Kenny for joining us. Until next week, say goodbye, Jose.
Keep the passion up and always care. Goodbye, Jose.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Awesome.